the charred remains of a macadamia orchard stretched across 90 acres of Hawaiian hillside. And in the center of the ash, Gary Whitfield held a single document that would change everything.
You just burned Air Force One's macadamia supply.
Evelyn Palmer's mouth fell open. Her hot pink blouse seemed to shrivel in the heat, still rising from the smoldering grove 3 weeks earlier. None of this had seemed possible. The HOA meeting that set everything in motion was just another Tuesday.
Those trees block my ocean view. I want them trimmed back, or there will be consequences.
She found Mick, a local contractor who needed the work, and offered him cash to clear what she called dead growth.
You sure these are dead? They look pretty healthy to me.
Mick fired up his chainsaw, and by sundown, 625-year-old trees lay in heaps. No one saw who lit the match, but by morning, the orchard was an inferno.
My father planted these. Every single one.
By the next afternoon, a fire inspector walked the property line and found a gas can half buried in ash. The fire was set deliberately. When Gary heard the words, the loss crystallized into something harder.
This is Gary Whitfield. I need to speak with someone about the Air Force One catering contract.
Half a world away, a diplomat aboard Air Force One opened his snack tray and found it empty. The Pacific Summit was underway, and the contracted macadamia nuts were missing. Within 48 hours, Lieutenant Colonel Simmons stepped off a military transport onto Hawaiian soil. He requested a meeting at the orchard itself.
Mr. Whitfield, the White House takes this seriously. Your orchard was the sole supplier. We need to understand exactly what happened here.
He realizes this is no longer just his loss.
I am Agent Reese, Air Force Office of Special Investigations. This is now a federal matter.
Agent Reese made a note. The investigation was just beginning, but the machinery of federal justice had already started turning.
We'll need your full cooperation. Until we resolve this, the supply chain is compromised. Air Force One's in-flight catering is down.
OSC tracked down the contractor Mick within 24 hours. The man was already carrying guilt he couldn't shake.
She paid me double to clear the whole lot. I swear she told me they were dead.
Mick's admission turned the investigation hot. The trimming job she'd described suddenly looked like a deliberate clearing, and the timing of the fire was no coincidence. When Agent Reese knocked on Evelyn Palmer's door, the woman answered with the indignation of someone who'd never been challenged.
I only asked him to trim the lower branches. Whatever he did after that was his own decision.
Agent Reese knew she was lying, but Evelyn had already hired an attorney, and without a witness to the conversation, the case against her remained fragile. That evening, Gary retreated to his office. On the wall hung a photograph from 1946. His father, a young veteran, holding a macadamia sapling.
He'd be heartbroken. Every single tree held a piece of him.
Agent Reese found him there, staring at the picture. She asked him about the orchard's origin.
My father served in the Pacific. These trees were a gift for his service. He planted them with his own hands.
Evelyn didn't stay quiet for long. The morning after being questioned, she gave an interview to a local news blogger, painting herself as the victim.
He's been harassing me for months over a simple tree trimming. Now he's dragged the military into a neighbor dispute. It's pathetic.
The smear spread quickly. Neighbors who once waved now crossed the street. His name, once associated with the finest nuts in the Pacific, became something people whispered.
They'll believe anyone who screams loud enough.
That night, searching for something to hold on to, Gary emptied an old trunk his father had left behind. At the bottom, wrapped in cloth, was a photograph he'd never seen before. His father, young and uniformed, shook hands with a man in royal regalia. Between them, a small macadamia sapling. The image was labeled in his father's hand, with King Tofa Ahau Tupoth IV, 1945.
Dad always said these trees were a king's gift. I thought he meant it as a figure of speech.
The next morning, Gary called Agent Reese. He needed her to understand what had really been burned.
These weren't just commercial trees. They were a gift from the King of Tonga to my father. If that gets out, this isn't just arson anymore.
If that's true, the diplomatic implications are significant. We'll need to verify. In the meantime, Don't speak to the press.
Within 2 days, OSI verified the photograph through military archives. The trees were indeed a royal gift, planted in 1946. Under a diplomatic handshake, the State Department sent a confidential cable to the U.S. Embassy in Nuku'alofa. The Tongan royal family was about to learn what had happened to their gift. Evelyn's lawyer called her with news he'd heard through a contact. The investigation had just jumped from property damage to international incident.
I need to leave tonight. Book me anything.
She packed a single bag and drove to Kona Airport under the cover of darkness, boarding a red-eye to Los Angeles. But OSI had flagged her passport. As she scanned her boarding pass, 2 federal agents stepped forward. She was detained without a struggle, her face white as the agents read her rights. Gary was sitting in his orchard office when the call came. Agent Reese told him Evelyn had been arrested attempting to flee.
So it's not just arson anymore. It's a federal escape charge. She's sealed her own fate.
The Tongan embassy had been informed, and in a quiet palace an ocean away, a king was reading a report that would change everything. Within 48 hours, the Tongan king's office issued a formal protest. The destruction of the 70-year-old saplings was called an affront to Tonga's friendship with the United States. National news caught fire. The headline read, "Royal Family Condemns HOA, Arson, Air Force One, Caught in the Fire." Federal prosecutors formally charged Evelyn Palmer with arson, destruction of a federal supply asset, and interfering with the executive transport chain. Lieutenant Colonel Simmons faced the press corps with a grim expression.
This orchard was the sole supplier for Air Force One in-flight nuts. The shortage caused a diplomatic awkwardness during the summit. We are investigating.
That evening, a courier delivered a letter bearing the royal seal of Tonga to Gary's home. "Your father's service in the Pacific is not forgotten. Neither is his gift. The Kingdom of Tonga views this destruction as an attack on our shared legacy. We stand with you."
He'd be stunned. The whole world knows what these trees meant.
Agent Reese called Gary that night. State had requested the case be fast-tracked. The next day, Gary met privately with the Tongan consul. The consul assured him this would not be forgotten. 2 days after meeting the consul, Gary found a stranger in his driveway, an attorney holding an envelope. Inside, a cashier's check for $600,000 and a single line, "Drop all charges."
That money could replant the whole orchard. It could pay off every debt, but it would also erase what she did.
He sat at the table for an hour. The photograph of his father never left his sight.
I keep hearing Dad's voice. He'd say a man with nothing, but his word still has everything.
He slid the check back into the envelope and called his attorney to refuse the settlement. The next morning, he held a small press conference on the steps of the courthouse.
My father received those trees as a royal gift. I will not let their memory be sold for any price.
The federal judge set a trial date for the 10th of March. The press began calling it the Royal Tree Trial.
Dad always said, "A man's word is his bond. I intend to prove him right."
The courtroom was packed on the 10th of March. Mick, the contractor, took the stand first, his hands trembling.
I knew they weren't dead. She told me to clear everything and burn it. I took the money and didn't ask why.
The gallery gasped. Evelyn's lawyer shot up to object, but the judge overruled. The confession hung in the air. Then Evelyn took the stand. Her confidence was a brittle shield.
This is a witch hunt. I never told him to torch the place. He's a desperate man trying to save himself.
But the jury wasn't moved. When Gary took the stand, he held up the photograph of his father and the king.
My father earned these trees through service and friendship. She didn't just take timber, she tried to erase a legacy.
Several jurors wiped their eyes. The prosecutor let the moment breathe. In closing, the prosecutor called the fire a calculated attack on the presidency's supply chain, driven by nothing but a woman's ocean view. At 4:17 p.m., the jury filed out to deliberate. Gary sat on the courthouse steps, the photograph in his lap, waiting. The jury returned in under 2 hours. Gary gripped the bench, his father's photo in his pocket. The judge read aloud. Guilty on all counts. Arson, destruction of a federal supply asset, interference with the executive transport chain. Evelyn's composure shattered. A choked sob slipped out, and her attorney had to steady her in her seat. The judge handed down 7 years in federal prison and ordered $2.3 million in restitution. The gavel fell like a door closing.
Dad, she tried to burn your legacy, but your gift just landed her in a federal cell.
The Presidential Travel Office commends this verdict. The security of Air Force One's supply chain must be absolute.
The Kingdom of Tonga expresses its satisfaction. The destruction of a royal gift to a Pacific veteran was an insult we will never forget. We stand with Gary Whitfield. The morning headline read, HOA Karen condemned by 2 monarchies, Air Force One arsonist sentenced.
She burned 90 acres for an ocean view. Now the whole world will remember her as the HOA chair who defied a king and the president.
Outside the courthouse, Gary lifted his father's photograph toward the sky. The crowd erupted, and somewhere a voice called out, "For the king." The cheer shook the palm trees. 6 months later, Gary knelt in the same soil that had held his father's trees, a box of saplings beside him. The Kingdom of Tonga had sent a fresh shipment of seedlings, a direct gift from the royal nursery. A small ceremony gathered neighbors and the Tongan consul, who helped Gary press the first tree into the earth.
Air Force One expects its nuts. Mr. Whitfield, your new contract is approved. Welcome back.
Dad would have loved this. The trees are back. The contract is back. Everything she tried to burn is coming up green.
From above, the 90-acre grid showed tiny green points breaking through the ash, a geometric promise. The 100-year royal legacy now had a second chapter, written in soil and stubborn hope.
A king's gift, a veteran's hands, and one son who refused to let go. Some things are worth more than an ocean view.
By the next harvest, Air Force One would serve nuts from these very rows. But the deeper harvest had already come in. Justice had been rooted as deeply as the trees, and Gary Whitfield's word was his bond. A week after the replanting, while organizing his father's trunk, Gary found a sealed box he'd missed before. Inside was a letter from the King of Tonga, dated 1945, addressed to his father. It was marked confidential. The saplings are part of a secret accord. So long as they flourish, the United States guarantees Tonga's sovereignty. Keep them safe.
The trees weren't just a gift. They were a living treaty. And Evelyn nearly broke it.
The White House didn't just want nuts. They needed those trees alive to honor a 70-year-old pact. He called Agent Reese. She confirmed the State Department had kept the diplomatic dimension classified, even during the trial.
Only a handful of people know. If the king's gift had been destroyed without replacement, it could have triggered a review of our Pacific alliances.
The sapling in the ground suddenly felt heavier. Gary wasn't just a farmer. He was the custodian of a kingdom's trust.
Dad carried this secret for 60 years. Now I know why he never let anyone touch those trees.
The weight of legacy settled on his shoulders, but so did a new purpose. The orchard wasn't just his. It was a nation's promise. 2 days after uncovering the letter, Gary received a summons. Lieutenant Colonel Simmons wanted him at a secure facility on the base immediately, inside a windowless briefing room. Simmons stood beside an unsmiling State Department official. No windows, no phones, no record.
What you've uncovered is classified beyond top secret. That treaty still forms the backbone of our Pacific defense posture. If Evelyn Palmer's attorneys get wind of this, they'll argue the trees were a legitimate military target. She could walk on appeal. We need you to sign a non-disclosure agreement. The treaty's existence cannot be part of any public court record, not even to keep her in prison.
So, to protect the nation's promise, I might have to let the woman who burned my father's trees walk free on a technicality.
Simmons slid a pen across the table. The scratch of metal on wood echoed like a gavel in the silence.
Dad kept this secret for 60 years. He must have felt this same weight, choosing silence over glory. You are asking me to choose between my father's justice and a pact I never knew existed.
We're asking you to be the custodian your father was. Silence is a form of duty, Mr. Whitfield.
Gary stared at the pen, then at the photograph in his pocket. He signed the NDA with a slow, deliberate hand.
Dad would hate this, but he'd hate a broken promise even more.
Simmons nodded and collected the document. The tension in the room barely eased.
Now for the bad news. Evelyn Palmer's appeal was filed this morning. Her attorneys are arguing improper jury instruction.
The appeal had nothing to do with the treaty. But if she won, the whole case could unravel.
We need you to testify at the appeal. Without the treaty, you are just a farmer whose trees were burned. They'll paint you as vindictive.
Without the treaty, my testimony loses its weight. I'd be asking a court to keep her locked up for burning my property, not for endangering a nation.
Simmons slid a folder across the table. It contained a script of what Gary should say, a carefully sanitized version of events.
You want me to lie by omission, to pretend those trees were just a family business.
We want you to protect the treaty, and in doing so, you might just protect yourself. She's dangerous, Gary. If she walks, what happens next time?
Gary lifted the script, its redacted language like a map of everything he couldn't say. The silence in the room pressed against his chest.
Every word sanitized. But if I don't give them this, she might walk.
He glanced at the photograph edged from his pocket, then back at Simmons.
I'll do it. Not for the White House, not for me. For my father and the promise he kept.
That's all we ask. The appeal hearing is in 2 days. We'll prep you.
For hours, they rehearsed his testimony, stripping every trace of the royal connection. Gary felt his father's legacy being silently locked away.
This isn't the truth. It's a scripted shadow. But it's the only weapon I have left.
When the session ended, Simmons handed him a sealed copy of the approved testimony.
I'll see you in court. And I hope this works, because if it doesn't, we all lose.
He stepped into the evening air, the NDA in his pocket feeling heavier than any photograph ever had. The appeal courtroom was smaller, quieter, but the air was just as thick. Gary sat in the gallery, the NDA still sealed in his memory.
This script is a lie, but it's the only truth they'll let me tell.
Gary took the stand and spoke the redacted lines, describing the orchard as a generational family asset, stripping the story of its crown. The defense attorney pounced. Wasn't this just a landscaping dispute blown out of proportion by a sentimental farmer?
Don't mention the treaty. Don't mention the king. My father would forgive me. He'd hate it, but he'd understand.
The prosecutor redirected, painting the orchard's destruction as a deliberate act against federal supply, nothing less than economic sabotage.
They're just nuts. My lawyer will get me out of this.
Closing arguments ended. The judge peered over her glasses, her voice cool. I will issue a written ruling within 1 week. Until then, the original sentence stands, and the defendant will remain in custody.
A week. 7 more days of wondering if she'll walk free. Every hour will feel like a year.
The week passed in slow motion. Every morning, Gary walked the young orchard, counting green shoots, trying to ignore the phone that never rang.
These saplings are my father's second chance. If she walks, she'll see them from her ocean view and laugh.
On the 6th day, Simmons called, voice tight. The ruling was coming tomorrow. A courier would deliver it to Gary personally at noon.
And if it goes against me?
We'll deal with it. But we've done everything we can.
That night, Gary couldn't sleep. He sat on the porch, watching the stars, his father's photograph resting on the arm of the chair.
Dad, tomorrow I might lose, but I'll never let them forget what these trees meant to you, to the kingdom, to me.
At exactly noon, a black sedan pulled up. The courier stepped out carrying a sealed document with the federal court emblem. Gary's hand trembled as he signed for the envelope. The courier nodded once, then drove away without a word.
This is it. The answer to whether a king's gift survives one woman's greed.
Gary tore the envelope open with a single motion, the paper inside crisp and unmistakably final. The judge's ruling was brief. Appeal denied. The original conviction and sentencing stand.
Denied. She stays in prison. Dad's legacy is safe.
He exhaled a breath. He'd held for 7 days. Tears blurred the old photograph in his trembling free hand. The phone rang. Simmons's voice was weary but satisfied.
You did it, Gary. The treaty is protected, and Palmer isn't going anywhere.
Across the island in her cell, Evelyn Palmer learned the news from her attorney and went silent. The fight was over. The ruling also ordered that restitution payments begin immediately for the orchard's replanting.
She'll pay for every tree. Not just in years, but in dollars. This orchard will be whole again.
Evening fell, and Gary walked once more among the saplings, the court ruling folded in his pocket. The fight was over, but the story was just beginning to spread. By the next sunrise, news crews had filled Gary's driveway. The island wanted to know how a quiet farmer had beaten the woman who tried to burn his legacy.
The appeal denial confirms what we've known since the first gavel fell. Evelyn Palmer is guilty. The White House is grateful for Mr. Whitfield's cooperation.
The Tongan royal family issued a final statement. The king commends Gary Whitfield for his courage. The 70-year friendship endures, rooted deeper than any fire. The morning papers ran the headline, HOA, Karen condemned by 2 monarchies. Appeal fails. Social media erupted in memes. Evelyn Palmer sat on her cot, staring at a clipped article. The hot pink blouse was gone, replaced by prison gray. The ocean view was now a cement wall. Gary received calls all morning. Then Simmons called one last time.
You are a hero, Gary. Quietly. The treaty stands, and so does your legacy. Air Force One will be serving your nuts again soon.
Gary walked the orchard alone. The paparazzi gone now. The saplings stood in neat rows, a future no one could burn away.
Dad, she paid for every branch, and the whole world knows who you were.
Above the grove, a helicopter captured the image of new growth against the old ash. The screen flashed. The price of an ocean view. Within a month, the presidential office issued a commendation. The Whitfield orchard was officially recognized as a pillar of the enduring U.S.-Tongan friendship. The Tongan consul returned for a ceremony, pressing a bronze plaque into the soil, where royal friendship took root, 1946.
Dad, they're making your trees a national landmark. The secret is still ours, but the honor is finally public.
The restitution flowed in, funding a full-scale replanting. 600 new saplings from Tonga arrived, their roots carrying the same royal lineage.
Air Force One supply is officially restored. Your nuts are once again the only ones served at 40,000 feet.
Evelyn Palmer's prison detail was yard maintenance. She trimmed hedges around the inmate recreation area. Her ocean view now a cement wall topped with razor wire. A magazine cover featured Gary's silhouette against the new trees. Headline: The Man Who Saved a King's Gift. The story was no longer about revenge, but about restoration. Gary stood alone before the plaque, the photograph now framed beside it. His father's eyes seemed to smile back.
You kept your word, Dad. So did I.
The price of an ocean view was $2.3 million in restitution, 7 years in prison, and a royal condemnation. But the price of preserving a legacy was priceless. A week later, the evening news broadcast closed with an update. The Whitfield orchard had just shipped its first new harvest for Air Force One. The footage showed crates marked with the White House seal being loaded onto a military transport, the plaque visible in the background.
Every nut that leaves this orchard carries a legacy now. The president appreciates it.
That afternoon, a courier brought a personal letter from the King of Tonga. Not a public statement this time, but a handwritten note. My father planted these trees with your father's hands. You have honored them both. The kingdom remains in your debt.
You hear that? Dad, a king just thanked us.
He placed the letter in the old trunk, next to his father's uniform and the 1945 photograph. The circle had closed. The orchard stretched green and full toward the ocean. The view she once demanded was now framed by 600 saplings.
The view is still there, but my trees are taller.
He turned back toward the plaque, where his father's gift would stand long after every view had changed. Gary knelt and touched the bronze letters. A monarch's gratitude, a father's honor, and a son's promise, all pressed into this one small square of earth.
You gave me these trees when I was a boy. I never understood them until they burned.
The orchard had silenced the news crews, but it had not silenced his heart. Every sapling whispered a name.
She thought she was burning an obstruction. She was burning a bridge between two nations.
He looked one last time at the ocean, glimpsed between the rows. The view had not disappeared. It had been earned, now, by roots. In the distance, the sound of a jet, maybe Air Force One on a Pacific flyby, rolled across the sky. The sound was fitting, like a salute from the president himself. The plaque weathered in the sun. The words "where royal friendship took root" now flanked by two small macadamia seedlings. Gary stood and brushed the soil from his knees. He walked not toward the house, but deeper into the grove. Some views are worth more than a lawsuit. Some legacies, more than a kingdom's silence. And some men, more than all the ocean views in the world. The morning after the flyby, Gary watered the saplings by hand, a ritual he'd learned from his father. The soil drank deeply, and the leaves seemed to reach higher.
Every drop is a promise I am keeping.
No news cameras left, no lawyers called, just a orchard growing in the quiet, the way his father had known it. The plaque became a quiet landmark. Tourists came, but not many. They'd read the story, touch the bronze, then stand and listen to the wind in 600 new trees. One visitor left a small flag of Tonga pinned beside the plaque. Gary found it the next morning, still damp with dew.
Dad, they remember you, even the ones who never met you.
The ocean view remained, forever altered. Not blocked, but guarded. A green wall of memory and diplomacy. Inside the old trunk now rested the king's letter, the court ruling, and a fresh photograph. Gary, smiling among the young trees, holding a bag of the first nuts for Air Force One.
All of it for a handful of nuts. Yet the whole world knows their worth now.
As the sun climbed over the Pacific, Gary turned off the irrigation and stood still for a moment. The orchard was no longer a supplier. It was a promise, kept